Hey, we've got a shorter one today. This one is a football explainer
Welcome to Understanding Soccer in Europe in 4 Simple Steps, a guide for Americans.
for soccer.
Although from the outside it may seem complex and confusing, to
Some
understand how
maths.
soccer works in Europe, you really only need to know 4 things.
Okay.
Number 1. Each country has its own soccer league. Seasons run from August to May, in which each team plays every other team twice, once at home and once on the road. Games are divided into two 45-minute halves, and when the game is over, the winner is awarded 3 points, the loser 0, and in the event of a tie, each team gets 1 point.
Wait, he already said a lot there. Okay, so if each country has their own league, and then a league is made up of clubs, which country has the most clubs? Professional, because then I guess there's semi professional and amateur and other tiers. I'm not sure of the terminology. Is it too many to count? Or does there have to be a fixed amount of clubs per league, especially if every team plays each other twice per season and the season's only from August to May? There's a fixed amount of time. All right, that's my first question.
After each team has played all the other teams twice, the team with the most points is crowned champion of the league. They get a big trophy, a parade, and the season is over. There are no playoffs. Sort of. But more on that in a minute. Before the books are closed on the season, there is still one small bit of housekeeping to be done. Number 2, relegation. We'll use the German League as an example. Every year, when the German League has concluded and the champion has been crowned, the 3 teams with the least amount of points are kicked out of the league. This process is known as relegation. The 3 vacant spots are subsequently filled by the top 3 teams from Germany's second division. And unlike, say, baseball in the US, teams in the second and subsequent divisions are not owned by teams in the top division. Imagine if the Pittsburgh Pirates or Oakland Raiders had to fight at the end of each season just to stay in the league. What if instead of coasting to the bottom for better draft picks, they were fighting to the bitter end to avoid the $40 million revenue loss that relegated teams suffer in the first year alone?
That's a lot.
Not to mention the fact that in England, 9 different teams have gone financially insolvent within 5 years of relegation.
Wait, that makes relegation one of the most interesting parts so far. So, if I understood that right, a team from a lower division could take the spot of a team from a higher division if they outperform them during the season. How often does that happen? That must keep people on their toes. And it's way more interesting if you're a fan of a team from a lower division who pulls off that upset. Then you're watching a more high stakes game. No wonder people get so passionate about some of these games. Okay. If more sports had this type of system, I said that word, I would probably be watching more.
Okay, interesting enough, you're thinking. But what about that whole lack of playoffs part? Number 3. Each country also holds an elimination-style tournament, referred to as a cup. But instead of being held after the 9-month league is over, cup games are scheduled in between league games, normally in the middle of the week. One additional perk about the cup system is that teams from all levels, down to semi-professional and even some amateur teams, are invited to play, and if they do well, can progress, and occasionally even knock off a top team. So every year, these midweek elimination games continue until there are only 2 teams left, who play each other in the cup final. After 90 minutes, a cup champion is crowned, they get a trophy, and a parade. So, between the league and cup games, we get a great picture of who the best and worst teams in each country are. But wait a second, you ask. What would happen if the best teams from each country in Europe all got together and played each other? Good idea. Number 4. The resulting competition is called the UEFA Champions League, and it is without a doubt the single greatest club competition of any sport anywhere in the world, period. Think of the NCAA tournament, but with better quality of play, more than double the fan base, and quadruple the enthusiasm. And yes, Europe even has their own version of the NIT as well. So, through a
What's
complex
the NIT?
and drawn-out process, teams from all over Europe compete just to qualify for this tournament. And starting each September, the top 32 teams are put into 8 groups of 4. Each team plays the other members of its group 2 times, once at home and once on the road. Come December, the winner and runner-up from each group move on to the knockout round. And this is where club soccer is at its finest. Teams are paired up individually and again play 1 home and 1 away game, with the winner from each pair moving on to the next round until only 2 teams remain. The Champions League final is then held as a single game each year in May. And unless it's the World Cup year, this is the most important soccer game of the year. After 90 minutes, a champion is crowned, the trophy is awarded, parades commence, and all clubs go on break until the madness fires back up again in August. So,
When I lived in Spain and the game was won, I've seen a guy climbing a street pole and trash cans on fire. So there's definitely levels to celebration.
to review. Number 1. Each country has its own league. Number 2, the worst teams are kicked out of the league and replaced by the best teams from the next division down. Number 3, throughout the year, each country also holds a playoff-type tournament called a cup. And number 4, the UEFA Champions League is a tournament involving all of Europe and is the most important competition in all of club soccer.
Wow. For 3 minutes, I actually learned something with that one. Okay, this is from a channel called Pen on Paper, who I'm going to link down below. I'll assume that most of you already knew this information, so essentially you were just watching me learn it. If you have more to add, and I'm going to guess there's way more to say, please feel free to do that in the comments. I didn't realize how many games are actually played per season. But I get a lot of recommendations for European football videos and almost none for South American football, where it's also big. So if you have a video recommendation that you think we should watch in the future focused on South America, or even mixing European football and South American football, I'm not picky. Please drop the title down below for me. Recently, or semi-recently, as I record this video, the Copa America was on. And I caught parts of that by default because I felt like it was on in every third bar I would pass in some of the shops. And at this point on the channel, we've seen videos about Messi, Zlatan, and Ronaldinho. So tell me who you think should be the next player we watch a video on. Also, a side note, the Paralympics just ended, but I was watching blind football in the Paralympics, which I thought was so interesting. There was a game between Brazil and Colombia. Players have to wear eye masks, although they're all B1 category of blindness. I guess the eye masks were to make sure that the playing field was actually leveled. And the people in the stands have to be relatively quiet so that the players can hear the guide who's telling each person where to move on the field. It was such a display of skill because they really have to rely on their senses. And it made me realize just how many people love football in all its forms. Very inclusive sport. So although the Paralympics are over, maybe you can find clips online. I'll try to find the clip and link it down below for you. Other than that, just leave your thoughts on this one. I don't have a book or music recommendation for today, so I'll add extra in the next. And that's really it. Thanks for watching with me.